Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Carol Henderson, Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion, Chief Diversity Officer and Advisor to the President for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Emory University. It is indeed a pleasure to be here this afternoon with our distinguished guests. Our office, given the profound losses that we have experienced by those trailblazers in social justice and the civil rights movement, the Honorable Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Joseph Lowry, and today we are going to pay special homage to Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, who at the gentle and young age of 96 years transitioned but left us such a wonderful, wonderful legacy to consider. I have two distinguished guests here, but I want to kind of set the context so you understand what we mean by this legacy and responsibility. That theme came up because we understand that there were those who came before us, but we have a responsibility to carry on not only that legacy, remember who they are, but also move the agenda forward. We have to be active in that context of social justice, justness, rightness, and the reorientation of a world that has become very polarized and can be very inhumane, but also be full of love and that possibility of transformation. And so today, I have the pleasure of having Mr. Christopher Davis, and also to our delight, the daughter of Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, Denise Vivian Morse. And so welcome, Christopher and Denise. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'll call you Chris because I know if I say Christopher, Chris is going to say, that's what my mother called me, so I'm going to call him Chris. It's a pleasure to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself to the Emory community, and we'll set the context to why this is important. Let me also say that a year ago in January, we had a reading of a musical in honor of the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, but also his wonderful wife, Octavia Vivian. They were a dynamic duo and were transformative in the movement. And so this musical honors that life. And we thought it would be great to circle back around to say, and we were so honored because Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian was present to see this reading, and it was just the highlight of my life. And so we have Chris and Denise, who are very much part of that, and I'd like them to introduce themselves first. So, Denise?
Oh, okay. Greetings, everyone. I am Denise Morse, and I'm the second daughter out of four of CT. I'm the first daughter of CT and Octavia Vivian, and I have three brothers, by the way. I am a self-employed sales representative. I've been doing that for about 17 years, working in fundraising with schools, private and public. I'm the grandmother of four kids and a mother of two daughters and stepmom of two other daughters. And I live in Atlanta.
Yes, and a force to be reckoned with. She is definitely with her siblings, um, honoring the legacy of their father and allowing us entry into that space in wonderful ways and connection with our papers that we have here at Emory University, which we will talk about later. But it's key that this conversation will acknowledge and hopefully continue to draw interest to those papers that have been indeed informative and crucial in looking at the ways in which social movements and particularly social justice movements unfold. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Well, first of all, Dr. Henderson, thank you and the Emory family for inviting me to participate in this. And I want to thank Denise and the Vivian family and the Vivian estate for allowing me to be a part of this with them as well. My name is Chris Davis. I'm a native Atlantan, and I am an entrepreneur. I'm a producer, uh, television producer. I produced for BT for the last 12, 13, 14 years. And so now my focus is in live theater, and I'm the creator, executive producer for For Peace I Rise, the CT Vivian story. And so I'm just happy to be a part of the call.
This is great. And I should say, and Chris could talk about this later, how this staging or this reading here at Emory was recognized by the Georgia Senate. There was a resolution that was given in honor of it as well. So let me start with the first question. What was the inspiration for this play, For Peace I Rise, this musical, which is the first one of its kind?
Well, Dr. Vivian and I had a personal friendship, and so the inspiration is has sort of two parallel tracks, really. No, well, they're actually not parallel, but two tracks. So my uncle was Dr. King's personal photographer. My mother was raised in Selma, Alabama, and we still have a home in Selma. My aunt still lives there, baby sister. And so long before we arrived in Atlanta, we were connected to this civil rights story. My grandfather, who built our home in Selma, was a cook during World War II. He had an eatery in Selma, and his contribution to the march from Selma to Montgomery was to feed marchers. I mean, that's what he knew to do, is to feed large numbers of people, and he did that. That was his contribution. And so one of his daughters ended up marrying my uncle, and so they became part of the civil rights family. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, the Vivian family, CT and Octavia, moved to a part of Atlanta. At the same time, my mother moved us to that same part, and they enrolled their children at the same high school. And that's when I began my relationship with just about all of the CT and Octavia Vivian children. Mark and I were inseparable. Wherever you saw Mark, you saw me. Al Vivian came a couple years after us. I still have Mark Vivian's yearbook at my house. Mm-hmm. So we just all grew together. And so it was just from the conversations I had with CT in terms of our friendship, and he would help everything I ever wanted to do. He would help me when I was producing for BET and we needed a segment or whatever. We could always count on CT to provide that support for us. And then he had things that he wanted to do. For example, many people may not remember when the city of Atlanta unfortunately had to disconnect the water at Morris Brown. Well, CT single-handedly raised the money to have that water turned on. And so I said to see, this is a story that we can help you with. So we had a platform, and we just basically grew from there. And I told him, I said, there's something I really want to do for you. And I started this process about 6 years ago. And I realized that because I used to just pull up everything on Google that had CT associated with it, and I saw at Emory that you guys were recognizing him for his Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's how it kind of started. Then I realized Emory's got a lot of presence in this space. And then I realized that you had the CT and Octavia Vivian papers. I was like, wow, okay. So I registered, got my account. Then I started going over to look at the collection. And I was like, my goodness, this is just an absolute treasure trove. Mm-hmm. So we were able to start developing the story. So at that time, I engaged Thomas W. Jones as the. I wanted him to direct initially, and I wanted him to play CT Vivian. He told me, no, we got to get somebody bigger than me to play CT Vivian. So Tom got his account, and we would go over to the papers. And so that was our connection. We were able to really delve into this particular story. So I knew that it made sense for us to have a relationship with Emory, but I just didn't know anybody at Emory. My youngest daughter was doing a program at Emory called the Emory Math Circle, so I was on campus a lot, And I was reading the newspapers, and I realized there was some things going on at Emory, and I said, I better be careful. And so my point is that I just didn't know who to contact in order to advance what I thought was a natural marriage with Theater Emory, the papers, and all the work that you had already demonstrated with the relationship with CT Vivian. And then I read on the website two things that were very critical. One was that under the old provost, that you were promoting a project or a sort of I don't know if you call it a project, but it was called the One Emory concept.
Yeah, the strategic frameworks.
Okay, good. So I read that on your website, and to me, what I took from that was Emory had this interest in trying to collaborate intentionally with departments and to try to layer things on. I said, well, that's how I work. That's how I think. And then I realized that they had created this new position called Chief Diversity Officer. I said, now that sounds like the place where this ought to be. But I didn't know anybody. Then I realized they eventually hired somebody. Brought this person out of Delaware. I said, who could this person be?
He's gonna tell that story, Denise.
Well, and then so I said to myself, I'm a LinkedIn person. I found anybody on LinkedIn. And then I reached out to try to find Dr. Carol Henderson on LinkedIn. And I sent Dr. Henderson a message.
And he did.
You do not know me, and you're not here yet, but I have an opportunity that you might be interested in. But the challenge for me was, what is she going to label her priorities when she first gets to the city, get to Emory? I mean, what is she going to say to the Emory C-suite when they say, well, listen, we want you to come in and hit the ground running? And she says, yes, I'd like to help this group, stage a musical on the life and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. C.T. and Octavia Vivian. So what are they going to say to her? And so I was very concerned about that. And so what I decided to do was to start on both ends. We reached out to you, and then we also, and the provost office, and then we decided to connect with Theater Emory first too. And I realized that they had a program called Brave New Works. It's
Yes.
always easy to go into an organization if they have something already in place.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
so we decided to try to forge a relationship with Brave New Works, Theater Emory, and hopefully we thought that they could those departments could kind of come to the middle, and then we would be the beneficiaries of that. And that's kind of how it all started. And it actually worked out that way. I mean, Dr. Henderson, we really needed you to be able to help connect those different entities. And that's really how it happened.
Yes, and it was a gift to me. I will let everyone know that when you first came to me, I was awestruck, and it was just a huge responsibility because what drew me to Atlanta was the fact that this is the cradle of civil rights. And I was excited about it. I know some Atlantans, folks who are here, they get used to it, but it was new for me. This is stuff that I had been reading about, and then to meet one of King's closest confidants, and one who, in many ways, set the stage in his own right for the civil rights movement to be responsible for telling his life story, and to realize, and one of the things I love about this project is that it includes the archives and the wonderful resources that Emory has and makes available to the campus community. It was a marriage. You're right. It was a collaboration that was destined to arrive at a successful end. I want to ask Denise, so when you found out that we were going to do this musical about your dad, what was your first, and let me say too, and not forget my manners, as my mom would have told me, losing a parent is profound. And I want to say we indeed extend our condolences to the Vivian family. That loss is still raw. It's not that long ago. And so we thank you so much for even giving us the time today to speak about that.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And it's my pleasure because we, the family, are really excited about what Chris has created here. It's an amazing piece of work.
Thank you.
And when I first heard about it, it was funny because what Emory received initially were mom's papers. And I had no idea that there were love letters in there.
Yes.
Between she and dad. So for Chris to be able to find them and then create this body of work behind him was absolutely amazing. And it's what makes it so personal. It's really a very loving story. So we're excited about it because of that, because he found them at Emory and had the imagination to create something from them. It's amazing. And it's a body of work about the whole uh, struggle about the civil rights movement. I mean, it's not just CT and Octavia. It's so all those others, couples who helped move the change in history. So it's a beautiful piece of work, and we're excited about it.
Yes, profound, and the love story I think anchors this work for Peace I Rise. I think 58 years, if I'm getting the number right, that there's somewhere in there that they were married, which is amazing, and then have to raise children in a moment where, and we must not forget, where people's lives were at risk, where people were under governmental eye watches, I'll put it that way, surveillance, if you will, and to maintain that love, to raise healthy, engaged, productive, and just transformative children. I think that has to, and that love story, we when President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama became part of the White House, and of course, I love Black love. And so that display was marvelous, but they understood, even President Barack Obama understood that there were others that came before them who also had demonstrations of Black love. And so that's what I saw in Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian and Mrs. Octavia Vivian, but also, their connection to Reverend Dr. King and Mrs. Coretta Scott King and others who were instrumental in anchoring what this movement is and the family part of it, because one person in the movement means the whole family is in the movement. You just can't separate a person from that. So my next question will be, what do you think the lasting impact of For Peace I Rise will be?
Well, let me take that, if you don't mind, quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try to explain where the title comes from.
Mm-hmm.
For Peace I Rise it relates to Reverend Vivian's stance against Sheriff Clark in Selma. And so Sheriff Clark punches C.T. Vivian, he falls. So C.T. will tell you that he knew the best thing for him to do was to remain on the ground. But he knew if he did that, he could not advocate in the way that he has done then, that he did then, and that he continued to do. And so we are asking, every time someone says, "For peace I rise," we say that's right. Or we say, "Will you? Will you rise for peace?" So peace in the For Peace I Rise is not the absence of war. This piece these are all of our liberties that CT fought for. He couldn't swim, but he would go fight to give you access to the beach. So the peace part, those are our liberties. So for our liberties, I will rise.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a passing of the baton. And I remember thinking how I really felt about the fact that he and Congressman Lewis passed on the same day.
On the same day. That is on the same day. Just amazing.
And I just thought, how does that make me feel? And I said to myself, and then those others started falling, and then it was one after another. They were moving out of the way. This is a passing of the baton.
Mm-hmm.
CT is saying, it is your turn. Black Lives Matter. He would be very proud. It is your turn. And he is saying, basically, will we rise to protect and advocate for these liberties? So that's where that comes from. So I think that from a creative...
And the strength, can I add to that, Chris? The strength to be able to get hit and not respond. I don't know where that came from, because I'm sitting here thinking, that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't know what my response would be in that moment, but the courage and the dignity that it took to do that. And that is a transformative moment, because everyone points back to that moment as being pivotal for shifting some of the gains that were made in the civil rights movement. So I just wanted to add that, not to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. But well, I love what Denise said about, her dad did not want credit. And he would tell you, we found, Dr. King, and he was our leader. And they followed him as their leader. Ralph Abernathy, who, Denise, your mom's favorite, based upon my research at Emory, your mom's favorite was Ralph Abernathy.
She loved him. Yeah.
And she loved him. And so what people don't understand about this movement is that it was strategically done. And the strategist was C.T. Vivian.
Mm-hmm.
He laid the strategy down, and they had to train. So when we first started this production, Dr. Vivian's still alive, and we said we're going to do for C.T. Vivian and his legacy what Hamilton did for Hamilton. But now that he's passed, everybody knows C.T. Vivian now, but now the goal is to explain to you what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And why he did it, the reasons why, and the mechanics of it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what the plan is now. So the legacy is going to be to do it and to demonstrate his relationship with other people. And that's why, Denise, and I'm glad you mentioned that, it was intentional to make sure that other people that your father would want to get credit as well are in this musical.
I know. I love this part of this part of your work, in that it wasn't just the couple, CT. It wasn't just CT. It was CT and Octavia, but it wasn't just Martin. It was Martin and Coretta. It wasn't. It was Hosea and his wife.
Yes.
It was James Orange and his wife. It was Abernathy and his wife. It was, and not everyone was married, but for the most part, they were.
Yes.
And they were all raising children, but the women were all there 100% supporting their husbands, even though they knew their husbands may not come home that night,
Yes.
even though they knew that their homes could be bombed, as happened to Martin and Coretta. But they all stuck together. And in fact, I can't think of maybe more than one divorce in the whole group. I mean, they just stayed together and worked together. And
wasn't that a nice scene with your mom and Coretta in the musical? That was.
It was. My mother loved Coretta King.
Yeah.
Loved and respected Coretta. And in fact, she wrote the first biography of on Coretta.
Yes, she did.
She and Coretta was such a beautiful person. I'll never forget the last time I saw her, and just such a gentle, kind,
He
decent.
told Coretta in the musical, "It's your time. Time for you to tell your story. Go ahead and tell your story, Coretta. It's time for you to tell your story."
Mom actually had as we were going through just everything in the house since Daddy passed. I found some writings where Mama made it clear that, and I had never thought about it, that Coretta became the first Black woman to be known because of her husband. And if you stop in America, and if you think about that, it's probably true. I mean, she, because of her Black African American husband and his leadership, she also became internationally known.
Yeah.
And then we used to Black women being pushed forward without their men. There's something that the history of America has created a negative view of Black men. And so Coretta became the first Black woman to be known because of her husband. And I thought, that's a beautiful thing. It was very nice.
And carried that legacy forward. I mean, in ways, and added her own.
Yes, she did.
Her own lens to that. So it was not only carrying his, but also saying, "This is how I'm going to build upon that platform."
Yep, and then she pushed him forward, and he was honest. That's right.
And I think it also too, what you all are pointing to is the cost of the movement. This movement, how we sit where we sit, is not for free, whether that be physical, emotional, um, stress, financial impact. There's just a whole array of things that point to what the cost of the movement is, and that people were willing to sacrifice for our today. Denise, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I don't know that many people have thought about it, but nearly all of the men of the movement were educated and well educated. And so they could have gone back to their little community and made a little money. My dad used to say, he said, I would have been a millionaire had it not been for my work in the movement. They were all extremely bright, intelligent, well educated men, as was Martin, Bevel, Lewis, and Andy Young. That's another couple I left out.
Jose
Andy was
Reed
black.
was a chemist. He had a
Yes.
degree in chemistry.
Yes.
And so these are men who sacrificed what they could have done and could have been to risk their lives to fight for all of our freedom. And they weren't just the homeless guy on the street who thought he'd join in on a march. They actually had something to lose.
Yes.
A lot. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's why our conversation on February 3rd in Black History Month is so relevant and so important when we think of that legacy and responsibility, because oftentimes we're looking at ourselves very detached in Black History Month. Oh, I'll take in the program. Oh, I'll reflect on those that I already know in the movement. But it's nice to find out what is our responsibility to that. And so as we wrap this up, I have two quick questions. We're probably going to go a few minutes over, but one of the questions, and I think would be, what is Emory's responsibility as stewards of the Vivian papers and of the love story of Reverend Dr. C.T. And Octavia Vivian? What do you think our responsibility is? I know kind of what that is from my perspective, but I would love to hear that from Denise and Chris. So Denise?
Well, it seems like you've already pretty much done what you've needed to do in respect to For Peace I Rise. I mean, you've made
Yes.
materials available
Mm-hmm.
and to create something wonderful, and you've made them open to the public so that others can view history. Uh,
Yes.
would be my primary thought. Even down to you realize I'm pretty certain I'm correct that Emory has done a documentary on Upward Bound and
Yeah.
CT,
We've been
and
talking about that. Yes. And people
so
forget that he was the originator of our
yeah,
current day Upward Bound, which I am. When I met your father, I
yeah,
remember telling him that I am an Upward Bound baby. Well, grown person, but an Upward Bound. I came through that system, and so it was just so profound to be. I was given the privilege of meeting him in his home space, and to look at the person who had a dream, followed it, and I am the end product of that. And now sitting in this position, newly created as Chief Diversity Officer, is just a full circle moment for me in Atlanta that it gives me it just I am in awe of, and it leaves me speechless sometimes.
and Emory has created a documentary, Chris. By the way, if you haven't seen it, it's really pretty good
Yes.
on that how it happened, and so Emory's doing its job.
Yeah. Yes, I appreciate that. We're going to continue to build on that, but I think there's more we can do, making it available to first year students, tying it to our diversity, equity, and inclusion, and professional development work, because your dad started Basic Diversity, which is the first of its kind in the country, diversity training, which your brother Al Vivian now takes over, and it is world renowned. Everyone knows it from Oprah and everywhere else. And so that, just to think of those two things, that out of the movement, at the same time, he left imprints, what I call legacy imprints, those things, those seeds that continue to flourish and grow. It's transformative if all of us could do that. Chris, you want to add to that?
No, I love what Denise said. I really do. I just think that the world of the fact that you were able to go out and acquire these papers, that you preserved them and presented them in such a wonderful way, very professional. I mean, I would tell that by itself is just a major contribution, and then the fact that you have the internal wherewithal to be able to connect the papers to other departments through the right kinds of conduits. I would just say continue to circulate that which is already there. I can't thank the Office of the Provost enough. I can't thank the Emory enough. I can't thank the Marble Rose Library for just being willing to participate in all of this. And we're all beneficiaries of it. And so, as the Four Pieces I Rise musical, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. And so, any way that Emory wants to continue, I know that we have pledged to continue to promote Emory with our path to Broadway. And so, as far as I'm concerned, we'll always be connected at the hip.
We shall be connected in that way. So I'm going to end in this wonderful way. This is my English professor coming out, and I always love to leave people with affirmations and positive vibes and things that they can hold on to as they find and situate themselves in the movement and in movements are for change. One would be, could you both, Denise and Chris, quote or reflect on Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, a favorite quote of his or a favorite moment?
Well, I can. I mean, that's easy for me. The one that most stands out is he'd always say, "It's in the action. It's in the action that you know who you are, that you find out who you are." And that was just something he'd tell anybody. It's in the action. What are you going to do about the problem that's in front of you or the challenge? And in fact, his C.T. Vivian Leadership Institute here in Atlanta uses that. They have T-shirts with that saying on it. And I didn't realize that I was the only one who noticed that that's what Daddy, a phrase Daddy used all the time. They actually picked up on it long before me. But Dad's memoir is coming out next month in March. And the title is It's in the Action.
Love it.
So, in fact, we found some of his speeches as we're going through years and years of speeches, and he'll talk about that. It's in the action. It's in the action that we force America to live up to its vows. It's in the action that we make God proud. And so that would be the.
It's in the action. That's a wonderful. That is a change. That's fuel for the soul, because we realize change can't occur sitting. I mean, even the word says faith without works is dead. So you got to do some. You got to do something. And if you don't know what to do, get with somebody that does know what to do, so that we can enact this change. Because change has to occur with all of us. And that's one of the things that was so beautiful about your father. He had this light. As tense as everything was, he had a smile that could transform a room. He was just amazing just to be in his presence. So just to say that, to honor that in the action, to know that even that in moving light from person to person to encourage someone was just amazing. Chris, your favorite quote?
All I want to do in closing is just to say that there are two special moments. One was when my youngest daughter, we were all visiting, and your dad showed Erin, she wanted to know about the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then your dad took her into his study and read poetry. And she was there listening. And when he finished, he says, "Now that's good stuff, Doc."
You're right. That was one.
That's good stuff, Doc.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
That's how I want to end the call that way.
You're right.
Yes, that's a wonderful way. And to speak about, that's for another call, but to speak about that library, my goodness. I remember I saw that. Now, for an English professor, it was like someone had put me in Fort Knox with a bunch of money and just said, look, just simply amazing. Well, I want to thank Denise Morse I want to thank Chris Davis so much for lending us your time today, for speaking about the legacy and the wonderful life of just a brilliant and transformative human being in the Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. The world is all the better because he was in it, and because of what he left us behind and passed to us to do. So I've taken that charge, especially the diversity, equity, inclusion work he's done. And so I'm energized and forever transformed by that connection. So thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you all on campus when we can.